has been a little bit of an existential experience. That's why it probably will be more questions than answers. I also try to distinguish myself to not use any colors. So a little bit of prehistory. As I said, it's a little bit existential experience, so bear with me. From early on, OpenSSL was a purely volunteer-driven project, and it means that we collected people that were driven by their interests just to excel in things that they were doing and to fill the gaps that they felt feeling. And that means that project was developing in a rather organical manner. And there is a risk in such model that interests change, people change, and you run risk of stagnation. Project never sought for position it holds, and it was a great surprise to find that it's powering like 2/3 of internet. Of course, 2/3 an exaggeration, but it's probably a plausible number when it comes to explicitly HTTPS service. And it also was a great surprise to find how many, how widely used is it in appliances and small devices and TVs and fridges. As for specifically Heartbleed, the history goes back to 2008. That's when we got first bug reports from an aspiring German computer scientist. And open source development is heavily built on trust, and meaning that you got to earn the right to be called a developer or contributor. And if we ask if that German computer scientist had earned the trust, we would definitely say yes over the years. And this is exactly the mechanism that enabled the Heartbleed bug. That is, when submitter gets a little bit lower threshold for acceptance of his code or bug fix or anything. But the key question, of course, if the trust was breached, and it definitely was not breached, not from our viewpoint. And would we reject the new submissions from that guy? On the contrary, we would welcome it because he learned his lesson. Also, as events were evolving, we have been asked all possible kind of questions about personalities that over the persons being involved, and as if we hold some grudge against them. And I can assure you that it definitely wasn't the case. And we simply recognize that it was a collective responsibility. It could literally happen to any one of us. And at this point, it's probably time to discuss dark and light sides of the publicity. As for dark side, we have been called for custodians of internet, and the team were accused that the team has been responsible for our credit card data. And that was, we couldn't find justifiable. And don't understand me wrong, we don't disclaim the responsibility, but we only bear a small part of it. Given the widespread of use of OpenSSL, it's clear that enterprises should be also accountable for knowing what they're using and how, so that really we can't find the attempt to personificate our actions hardly justifiable. And indeed, if you consider that if you try to put 2/3 of internet on one guy, would it break him? It almost did. But enough about that. Publicity definitely made a favor to public on 2 levels. Awareness was increased, and it was also ensured that the hole was patched swiftly. And for our part, it brought to light, so to say, an existential conflict. That is, can a volunteer-driven project provide de facto infrastructure solution and in sustainable manner? And with that funding that we had, and that was virtually nothing. As for pre-Heartbleed funding, I used to say that special interest parts were indeed funded. Most glaring example is FIPS validation, that is security validation to use products in American government systems. But general purpose tasks like long-term maintenance or planning for next release or having some strategies was effectively remained volunteer-based. And as mentioned in the beginning, because participants' interest can change, the project did start showing signs of stagnation. That is, the participation of team members was low, and we had long request tracking backlogs, no very solid time frame for next releases and so on. But back to the question, can a volunteer project provide de facto infrastructure solution? It can get you rather far because, as I said, it was mind-blowing to find in how many places OpenSSL is used, and it goes all the way from mobile phone and to mainframe. And I used exactly that example. That is when my mother asked, what is it that I do used for? I had to say, in every mobile phone, well, not in yours. It ain't smart. There also was admittedly gray side of publicity. As I said, I mean, this incident woke more questions than answers. That's why probably you'll hear more questions that I pose as opposite to providing any answers. Being in business for a while, I can't get rid of feeling that whether or not an issue gets due attention is kind of a lottery. Of course, not this particular issue, because due attention was inevitable. We live in the age when researchers and companies reach out to make their names, and I'm not saying that it's bad, and Candemonium did a great job with a dedicated domain name and cool logo, but for good or even bad, more about it in a second. How many vulnerabilities go hardly noticed as a result, and as a result linger unpatched for a substantial amount of time? We don't know that. What I'm trying to say, that at several occasions I could observe that press fails to deliver accurate information, not only accurate information, but as I said, I mean, I experience it as a little bit of a lottery, what exactly get attention in press. And for this reason, I would like to challenge everyone present to stay alert and remember that if you don't hear about something, that doesn't really mean that there is no problem. And even contrary might hold true. That is, if you hear about something, it doesn't mean that it's a big deal. So that one has to remain critical as well. As for bad, that is gray side of publicity. There was a little bit of time clash in Heartbleed disclosure. That is, we had to release the fix 2 days earlier than planned. I mean, it's not like it's a really big deal, but sometimes we wish that there is an extra time to, in this case, might even to establish some honeypots to assess if it's been exploited in the wild its public. And of course, OpenSSL project is hardly in position to do that, so that we would have to resort to talk to bigger companies, maybe like Google or Akamai, to do the testing. But the connections are already there. Another great side is that, as I experienced it, I can see that there is erosion of terminology. As it says here, what substitutes a remote exploit nowadays? Nowadays, it's almost synonymous to social engineering. That is, if somebody clicks on a link, then it counts as remote exploit. I'm not saying that it's completely wrong to say that, but question is it helpful? Does it help to minimize controversies or even orient in the complex world? Now I'd like to tell a little bit about what happened afterwards. I'm not going to go into details about timeline and stuff like that, because one can read about it on the web, and there will be some links at the end. As a result of this experience, team has effectively reorganized itself, taken in new members. We are up to 14 now. Previously, we had 5, 6, but only 1.5, 2 that are active. And the good news is that several of that 14, including yours truly, I working full-time on it. We have implemented review process and drafted future plans. And probably most important in the context, that is that we published security policy. And that's definitely worth discussing. First of all, it's not something that we have put together in 1 minute, but it's rather formalization of pre-experience. Most important is that we don't consider that there should be some kind of mechanism for advanced distribution of patches or information based on some kind of paid subscription. That is, we don't feel that it should be sold. At the same time, we recognize that just publishing would be hardly appropriate. That is, we find it, we publish it, and let everybody else just discover it post factum. So for this reason, we have a non-discriminatory advanced notification policy about mere fact that on day X, the security fix will come out. And it's still probably not enough, so that for high severity issues, we give information to OS vendors, so to say. And we do it through third-party mailing list that is maintained and open wall org. That is, it's not for individuals, but for and not for really big organizations, but rather for specifically operating system vendors, so that they can prepare the updated packages a little bit in advance, so that rollout goes smoothly and there are no questions about which day vendor X released its package. It should be a little bit more synchronized. Rationale behind this decision is that in vast majority of cases, modern sites rely on OS vendors to provide framework for their applications, and it was deemed appropriate to do this. It's a little bit controversial, and we will reevaluate it later. And even if we run risk of leakage. And it should be noted that the policy, of course, applies only to the reports that originate within the team or submitted directly to the team. We have no control over organizations or individuals to do otherwise, so that don't hold your breath. In conclusion, I'd like to provide some random thoughts from developer viewpoint. That is, what question I would like to audience to ask themselves in order to minimize the probability that it happens again. And, well, I mean, the fact that I'm asking these questions, or ask you to ask yourself, means that I'm asking them myself. Modern organizations tend to try to formalize development process with various buzz methods. I'm not questioning the usefulness, they're definitely useful, but trouble is that you can't formalize human ingenuity. You can't tell somebody that it's their turn to keep critical eye on things. And sometimes it's human that stands between order and chaos, or rather, human ingenuity. And this is very, very complex question. All involved need to be encouraged to be critical. And how do you solve that with some pass method? Because just performing some steps in specific order is no guarantee of success, especially not in security. Then what tendency that I see is that there is incentive to pay for parts of solution and prefer not to question or know the details. Probably most glaring example is RFID. I mean, local transport card, can it be done better? I bet it's possible. Access cards, in pursuit of delivering solution at least cost, we seem to forget the value that, for example, access card is supposed to protect. And sometimes it might require change of protocol. I mean, consider this. I mean, would it be appropriate to demand that a user first wave the cards, enters the PIN, and then waves the card one more time? I mean, it's a small change of protocol, but it will make would enable so much more improved security of the system. Well, one can wonder how this, or what does this have to do with OpenSSL? Well, effectively, it's a little bit what happened to OpenSSL, that is industry forgot about it, or about the value that is supposed to protect. And question is, what else do we forget about? I mean, OpenSSL is not by any means unique in its position. So that there is a timeline about how events were evolving. Then we have roadmap and security policy. That would be all. Thank you.
Ni behöver förstås inte skriva ner det där. När jag svarar på utvärderingen efter den här dagen så får man alla slides. Andy, du pratade också svenska igår, eller hur?
Visst.
Ja, du gör det idag också. Ni är ju en liten organisation som har kanske burit ett ganska stort ansvar, kan man säga, under alla de här åren. Och med ett protokoll som används över hela världen av otroligt stora organisationer och företag och banker och allt möjligt. Och haft ganska små resurser. Någonstans hör jag dig säga att ja, men vi är för små för att bära det här stora ansvaret. Vi har inte haft de resurserna som krävs. Håller du med om det, eller?
Som jag sa, frågan är om man kan räkna med att det levereras liksom hela tiden. Som jag sa, i volontärbaserat projekt, det är svårt att kräva att folk lägger tid på saker och ting. Väldigt metodisk.
Absolut.
Utan,
Men nu har ni ju fått mycket mer resurser. Ni har fått hyfsat mycket mer pengar. Massa företag som har lovat att donera pengar till er. Ni har mer folk på väg in. Ni är många fler. Kommer man kunna ställa större krav på er nu då?
absolut. Och det är stor omställning, och minst för mig personligen. Och det är stor ansvar som jag personligen känner, och jag ska försöka leva upp till det.
Absolut, men jag bara tänker, liksom, kommer företagen, de skulle ge $100,000 var det årligen, ett gäng storföretag som ju tidigare har använt er teknik väldigt mycket men inte bidragit i någon större utsträckning. Kommer de då i sin tur säga, men vänta nu, vi gav er 100,000 här, varför funkar inte det här? Hur funkar den relationen? Han är inte riktigt...
Det finns inga svar på de frågorna, men när vi började diskutera detta, vi kände att hålla viss slags av oberoende är också viktigt. Man får inte låta den falla i händer av ett företag. Jag menar, vi måste se till alla möjliga användningsområden och ska inte försöka nöja ett företag. Och det återstår att se hur det fungerar, men hittills det ser ut ganska bra i meningen att de donationer som vi fick, de är mer eller mindre no strings attached.